It had been months, maybe closer to a year, since I'd last heard from my son, David. Not a call, not a visit, not even one of those short, polite texts people send out of obligation. After his wedding, things just changed. There was no fight, no dramatic moment, no shouting match. Just a quiet, gradual distance. Like someone slowly turning down the volume on a familiar song until you're left in silence, wondering if it'll ever play again. Every year before, Christmas had been our holiday. When David was little, we'd spend hours setting up the tree together. He'd hang the ornaments all on one side, while I quietly fixed them later when he wasn't looking. My late wife, Ellen, would bake those sugar cookies he loved, the ones shaped like stars and bells. We'd laugh, watch old movies, and fall asleep with the glow of the Christmas lights still on. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. When Ellen passed away, it was just me and him. We held each other through that storm. But as he grew older and life started pulling him in other directions, I could feel him slipping away. College, work, a new city, then Julia. Don't get me wrong, I was happy for him. She seemed nice at first, kind even. But over time, she drew invisible lines between us. Family events where I wasn't needed. Birthdays where I was too far away. Slowly, I became an afterthought. So when December rolled around this year, I didn't expect much. I'd already told myself I'd spend the day quietly at home, maybe make some soup, watch It's a Wonderful Life alone, pretend I didn't care. Then, one chilly morning, I heard my phone buzz. It was a message from David. "Dad, we're hosting Christmas dinner this year. You should come." Just 7 words. No apology, no explanation. But to me, it felt like a miracle. I read it again and again, afraid it might disappear if I blinked. "You should come." Those 3 words made my chest tighten. Maybe he missed me. Maybe he wanted to start fresh. Maybe this Christmas would be different. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. I spent that entire afternoon preparing. I ironed my only decent shirt, the one Ellen always said made me look presentable. I even polished my old shoes, the ones that had seen better days but still held their shine under the right light. I wrapped a small gift for my grandson, Tommy, a wooden train I'd been working on for months in my garage. It wasn't fancy, not compared to the blinking toys and expensive gadgets he probably got from his other grandparents. But it was made with care. Each piece sanded, painted, and fitted by hand. A little piece of me carved into every inch. As I wrapped the box in cheap red paper and taped the corners, I caught myself smiling. I imagined Tommy's face lighting up when he saw it. I imagined Julia saying something kind, maybe even thanking me. And I imagined David looking at me, not with pity or embarrassment, but with pride. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I'd say when I saw him. "You've done well for yourself, son. Your home looks beautiful. I'm proud of you." Simple words, but meaningful ones. I also thought about Ellen. If she were here, she'd tell me not to overthink it. "Just go," she'd say, "and be yourself. You're his father. That will always matter." I could almost hear her voice in the quiet of my room, soft and certain. It gave me comfort. The next morning, I woke early and brewed a cup of coffee. Outside, snow had begun to fall, slow and heavy, blanketing the neighborhood in silence. The kind of snow that makes the world look softer, gentler. I watched it from the window for a while, remembering all those winters when David used to run outside to catch snowflakes on his tongue. He'd come running back in, red-cheeked and laughing, yelling, "Dad, look!" I caught one. I smiled at the memory, even though it hurt a little. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago. As I packed the gift in my scarf, I hesitated for a second. What if it was awkward? What if Julia didn't really want me there, and this was just David's half-hearted attempt at doing the right thing? But then I thought, if I stayed home, I'd regret it. If there was even a small chance to mend things. I had to take it. So I set out. The streets were quiet, the air cold but crisp. The snow crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the bus stop. I didn't have a car anymore. Sold it last year when repairs got too expensive, but the ride wasn't long. I stared out the window the whole way, watching houses drift by, each one glowing with Christmas lights and warmth. Families gathering, laughter spilling from inside. I wondered if anyone else on that bus felt like me, alone but still hoping. When the driver called out my stop, I stepped off and saw David's house in the distance. Bigger than I remembered. White lights along the roof, a perfectly decorated wreath on the door. It looked perfect. Too perfect. The kind of home that belonged in a magazine. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, clutching the little gift in my hands. My breath turned to fog in the cold air. Part of me wanted to turn back, to protect myself from whatever disappointment might be waiting inside. But another part of me, the part that still believed in second chances, pushed me forward. I climbed the steps slowly, my heart pounding. As I reached the door, I could hear laughter inside. Julia's voice, cheerful and bright. Someone said something about the turkey, and everyone laughed again. It sounded like a happy home. I hesitated, then finally lifted my hand and rang the doorbell. The laughter paused for a second, replaced by the sound of footsteps approaching. The door opened, and there he was, my son. David looked older, sharper, his hair shorter, his jawline harder. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded. "Dad," he said flatly. Not warmly, but not coldly either. "David," I replied with a small smile. "Merry Christmas." He stepped aside. "Come in." And as I crossed that threshold, I told myself this was it. This was the start of something new. A bridge being rebuilt. A family coming together again. What I didn't know was that before the night ended, that same bridge would burn to ashes. The house looked like something out of a Christmas postcard. The kind that makes you pause and think. That's what the holidays are supposed to feel like. White lights traced the roofline perfectly, flickering softly against the snow. The windows glowed with a golden warmth, silhouettes moving behind the curtains. Laughter drifted through the glass, faint but distinct, the kind of laughter that comes easily when people are comfortable. But as I stood there on the front step, clutching the small gift bag in my gloved hand, I felt like an outsider looking in. I hesitated before ringing the bell. My reflection in the glass door looked tired, older than I remembered. Maybe I shouldn't have come. Maybe this was a mistake. But before I could turn away, the door swung open. "Dad," my son said. His voice was even, flat, not unfriendly, but stripped of the warmth I remembered. "David," I said with a smile I hoped looked natural. "Merry Christmas." He stepped aside. "Come in." The smell hit me first. Roasted turkey, cinnamon, pine needles, something sweet baking in the oven. It smelled like home, or at least what home used to smell like. Inside, everything gleamed. The floors were spotless, the furniture polished, garlands perfectly draped across the staircase. A tall Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated in gold and white. No clumsy handmade ornaments, no paper stars or lopsided snowmen like the ones David used to make as a boy. This tree was elegant, magazine perfect. I wiped my shoes on the mat and stepped in carefully, afraid to scuff anything. Julia's voice came from the kitchen. "Who was at the door?" David called back. "It's my dad." "Oh," that was all she said. Just oh. A moment later, she appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a red apron over a fitted sweater, her hair tied neatly. Her smile was polite, the kind of smile people use when they're being watched. "Hi, Mr. Roberts," she said. "Merry Christmas." "Please, call me Henry," I replied. She nodded, already turning back to the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready." And just like that, she was gone again. Then I heard it, the quick patter of small feet. Grandpa, Tommy came running from the living room. A flash of messy brown hair and excitement. He crashed into me, arms wrapping tight around my legs. I bent down, holding him close. The warmth of that small embrace melted away every ounce of doubt I'd felt outside. "Well, look at you," I said, smiling wide. "You've grown so much." "I lost a tooth," he announced proudly, showing me the gap in his front row. I laughed. "You sure did. Did the tooth fairy visit?" He nodded. "She gave me $5. $5? I whistled. "Inflation's even hit the fairies, huh?" He giggled, and for a moment, everything felt right again. But as I looked up, I caught Julia watching us from the kitchen doorway. Her smile had faded, replaced by something tight, unreadable. She turned away when our eyes met. David cleared his throat. "Dad, you can put your coat over there." He pointed to a chair by the entryway. Not a coat rack, not a closet, just a chair. I did as he said, carefully placing my gift bag on the side table. "You brought something?" he asked, noticing the red wrapping paper. "For Tommy," I said. "Just a little something." "Oh," he said. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He didn't respond. The house was filled with chatter. Julia's parents were in the dining room, their voices carrying through the hall. I could hear them laughing, talking about travel plans, the market, something about golf. They sounded comfortable, confident, like they belonged here. Come say hi, David said, motioning me toward the dining room. When I stepped in, the laughter faltered for a moment. Julia's father, a tall man with a full head of silver hair, stood to shake my hand. Ah, you must be Henry. Good to meet you. His grip was firm, his smile easy. The kind of man who always seems in control of the room. Likewise, I said. Her mother gave a small nod from her chair. Merry Christmas, she said politely, before turning back to her conversation. David gestured toward a chair near the end of the table. That's your spot, Dad. Thank you, I said, taking my seat. The table was already set. Fine china, crystal glasses, neatly folded napkins. Each place setting had a name card written in gold ink. Everyone had one. Everyone except me. I noticed it quietly, tucking the thought away. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe not. The dinner smelled incredible. Julia and her mother moved in and out of the kitchen, setting down dishes. Mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, roasted turkey, stuffing. It was a feast. But the air felt strange. Everyone chatted easily among themselves, inside jokes and shared stories from their side of the family. Every now and then, someone would toss a polite question my way. So, Henry, how's retirement treating you? Still living in the old house? Cold out there today, huh? Small talk. Filler. Words to patch silence. I answered each one kindly, keeping my tone light. But beneath it all, I felt like I was floating on the edges of something I used to belong to. When Tommy climbed into his seat beside me, I felt a spark of joy again. He leaned close and whispered, Grandpa, can I open your present later? Of course, I said. After dinner. He grinned. I can't wait. Julia shot him a quick look. Tommy, inside voice, please. He sank back into his chair, quiet again. I caught David glancing between us. Me, Julia, the rest of the table. His expression was tight, uneasy, like he was constantly monitoring, making sure everything stayed in balance. At one point, Julia's father made a toast. To family, he said, raising his glass. To health, happiness, and being together this year. Everyone lifted their glasses. I did too, but my throat tightened as I swallowed the wine. Together. It sounded so simple, so effortless. But in that moment, I realized I was only there out of formality. A prop in a picture-perfect scene. After the toast, conversation picked up again, but the warmth never reached me. Julia laughed easily with her parents, her hand resting lightly on her father's arm. David tried to engage me once or twice. Asked about the house, the neighborhood, but each time, Julia redirected him with a look or a question of her own. Subtle, quiet, but deliberate. By the time dessert was mentioned, I felt drained. Not angry, just empty. Like a guest who had overstayed his welcome before the night had even truly begun. Then Tommy leaned toward me again. Grandpa, he whispered, will you stay and play after dinner? I smiled, though my voice caught in my throat. I'll try, buddy. And as I watched him turn back to his plate, I realized something painful. The warmth I used to feel here wasn't gone. It was still there, just not for me. In that perfect house filled with laughter and golden light, I'd never felt colder in my life. Dinner was perfect, visually, at least. The kind of dinner you'd see in a holiday commercial. Golden roast turkey glistening under soft candlelight, silver cutlery catching the glow of the fireplace, wine glasses filled to the brim, laughter echoing through the room. Everything was just right. Every detail choreographed to show the world how happy and flawless this family was. Except, of course, for the quiet old man sitting at the far end of the table. That was me. I sat there, half listening, half pretending to be part of it all. Julia's family talked fast and loud, their voices overlapping like they were all competing to be heard. They laughed at jokes I didn't understand, stories from trips I'd never been on, people I'd never met. No one really talked to me. Every once in a while, Julia would glance in my direction and offer a polite smile, the kind of smile that said I see you, but I'd rather not engage. David, my son, tried once or twice to pull me into the conversation, asked me about the weather, about my old car, but his attention drifted the moment his father-in-law opened his mouth. It was clear who the real head of this table was, and it wasn't me. Still, I sat quietly, cutting my turkey, pretending to enjoy the food. I nodded when appropriate, chuckled softly when others laughed, and took small sips of wine to fill the silence in front of me. It's a strange thing, sitting in a room full of people and feeling invisible. You start to wonder if maybe you really did fade over time, if maybe your presence has become more of an obligation than a comfort. Then, halfway through dinner, the front door opened. A gust of cold air swept through the hall, followed by booming laughter. "Sorry I'm late," a voice called out. Deep, confident, the kind that commanded attention without even trying. Julia's father. He stepped in, brushing snow off his coat, his face red from the cold but glowing with energy. "Got stuck behind a snow plow," he announced cheerfully. Everyone laughed, real laughter this time, full and easy. David immediately stood up from his seat. His eyes darted toward me. "Dad, could you move?" he said, nodding toward my chair. "That's my father-in-law's seat." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right. "What? You said this was my spot." He gave a nervous little laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, but come on, it's just a chair." Just a chair. I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. Julia busied herself adjusting napkins that didn't need adjusting. Her mother poured more wine. Even Tommy looked confused, glancing between us with wide eyes. "I can move," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "But this was where you told me to sit." David's face tightened. "Dad, please, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make a big deal out of it." The words hit harder than they should have, like I was the one causing trouble just by existing. He stepped closer, one hand on my shoulder. "Come on," he said, his tone soft but impatient. I didn't move right away. Not because I wanted to cause a scene. God knows that was the last thing I wanted. But because, for the first time that evening, I felt something inside me crack. All the months of silence, all the polite distance, all the times I'd been left out or forgotten. It all condensed into that single, humiliating moment. He reached out again, this time more firmly, his hand pressing down as he nudged me aside. It wasn't a shove, not really. But it didn't need to be. It was enough to make me stumble slightly, enough for everyone to see. Enough to make me feel small. The room went silent. Even the clinking of cutlery stopped. Julia's father stood awkwardly in the doorway, clearly unsure what to do. Julia herself froze, her face pale. No one said a word. Even my grandson, sweet little Tommy, sat with his fork halfway to his mouth, eyes wide, watching his father push his grandfather out of a chair like he was a stranger who'd wandered in by mistake. I swallowed hard, forcing a thin smile. "Of course," I said quietly. "It's just a chair." I picked up my plate, the one I'd barely touched, and moved to the far corner of the room, near the small counter by the wall. My chair scraped against the floor, echoing painfully in the silence. David avoided my eyes as he gestured for Julia's father to sit. The man looked uncomfortable but complied, offering me a half-hearted smile that only made it worse. "Thanks for understanding," David murmured. Understanding. I sat there, alone at the edge of the room, the hum of conversation slowly picking back up. Forced laughter, the kind that tries to erase what just happened. But the air had changed. I could feel it. Heavy, awkward, charged with something unspoken. No one looked at me anymore. I was part of the background now. I tried to focus on my food, but the taste was gone. The turkey was dry, the wine too sharp. My appetite vanished, replaced by a hollow ache in my chest. I looked around the table, at my son, the boy I had raised, the boy who used to climb into my lap and beg me to tell him stories by the fire, and I wondered when exactly I'd lost him. Was it after his mother died? Was it when he got married? Or was it somewhere along the quiet, uneventful years when we simply stopped talking, one missed call at a time? I didn't know. All I knew was that the man sitting at the head of that table, laughing beside his father-in-law, wasn't the same boy I used to tuck into bed. Tommy looked over at me once or twice, his small brow furrowed. I smiled at him, tried to make it look like everything was fine. Kids notice things adults pretend not to see. And that night, he saw everything. As dinner went on, the conversation grew lively again. Stories, jokes, toasts. Julia's father told some tale about his golfing trip in Florida, everyone laughing at the right moments. Even David smiled, the earlier tension completely gone from his face. Everyone moved on, except me. I stared down at my half-eaten meal, the flicker of candlelight dancing across my plate. The chatter around me faded to a dull hum. For a brief moment, I thought about standing up, grabbing my coat, and leaving. Just slipping out quietly, without a word. But then Tommy caught my eye again, smiling hesitantly from across the table, as if trying to tell me, "Don't go, Grandpa." So I stayed. I sat through the rest of dinner, silent, invisible, and humiliated, my son's handprint still faintly burning on my shoulder. When dessert came out, a perfect chocolate cake, beautifully decorated, Julia's father made another toast. Everyone raised their glasses again, cheerful and warm. Everyone except me. I just sat there, staring at the reflection of the candles in my wine, wondering how something so small, a single chair, could break something so big. And in that quiet realization, I finally understood. It wasn't about the chair at all. It was about respect. And somewhere along the way, I'd lost his. The room buzzed again, slowly, like a machine rebooting after a power cut. Laughter, muted, cautious, dripped back into the air. Forks scraped plates, glasses clinked. The hum of polite conversation resumed. But none of it reached me. I sat at the small table near the living room archway, my plate balanced awkwardly on the uneven surface. From here, I could see everyone, but it was like watching a play through a fogged window. Julia leaned in toward her father, whispering something that made him chuckle. Her eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. My son, my own flesh and blood, was smiling again, carving another slice of turkey like the moment never happened. He poured wine for everyone except me. Maybe he didn't notice my empty glass, or maybe he did. My grandson, little Thomas, looked over from his seat. His fork hovered midair, his small brow furrowed as if trying to understand something he wasn't supposed to. I tried to smile for him, a gentle one, reassuring. But he didn't smile back. He turned to his mother, tugging at her sleeve. She whispered something, gave his hand a squeeze, and he went back to eating, quiet and confused. The laughter grew louder again, bouncing off the walls decorated with garlands and golden lights. Every so often, someone would glance at me, then quickly look away, as if I were a portrait of a dead relative they didn't quite know how to feel about. I ate slowly. The turkey was good, moist even, but it turned dry in my mouth, no matter how much gravy I added. At one point, Julia's father, big man, silver hair, the kind who liked to command a room, raised his glass for a toast. To family, he said, voice booming. Everyone lifted their drinks, even my son, whose smile was wide and easy. I raised my glass of water belatedly, half-heartedly. No one noticed. The toast ended, laughter returned, and the conversation rolled on about work, travel plans, and a new car someone had bought. I didn't join. What would I say? I didn't know these people. And the one person I did know was pretending I wasn't there. The clock on the wall ticked, steady and cruel. I thought back to Christmases long ago, the years when my boy was small, and we'd stay up late building toy trains and forts. When his laughter filled the house instead of this dull murmur of strangers. I used to tell him, family comes first, no matter what. And for a long time, I believed it. Now, looking at him across the room, I wondered if he ever heard me at all. Julia came over once, to bring a dish to the counter behind me. Everything okay? She asked, her tone polite, almost mechanical. Yes, I said simply. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. Good, she murmured and walked away. I sat there for another hour, pretending to eat, pretending not to hear the jokes, pretending not to exist. Every time my grandson laughed, I looked up, hoping maybe he'd come over again. Maybe he'd pull at my sleeve and ask me to play. But he didn't. Julia kept him busy, passing him candy, keeping him anchored safely on the other side of the table. When dessert came out, a pie that smelled like cinnamon and home, I couldn't bring myself to take a slice. My son stood, clearing plates, brushing past me as if I were furniture. I'll help with the dishes, he said to Julia. I waited for him to look at me, even just a glance, a flicker of regret. But he didn't. He kept moving, focused, purposeful. After a while, I quietly rose, carried my plate to the sink, and rinsed it. No one noticed. I stood there, staring out the small kitchen window. Snow was falling softly outside, blanketing the street, glowing under the yellow light of the porch. It looked peaceful, pure, untouched. The kind of silence that hurts and soothes at the same time. I thought about leaving then. Just walking out, coat or no coat. The air outside would be cold, sharp, honest. Not like this room, thick with warmth and absence. But I stayed. I sat back down, mostly because I didn't want to make a scene. Because even in my humiliation, I didn't want to be that kind of father. The one who stormed out, the one who made things worse. Maybe some small, stupid part of me still hoped he'd come over and say, Dad, I'm sorry. He never did. At some point, Julia put on music, soft, cheerful jazz that filled the empty spaces where my words should have been. Her family began talking about a vacation they were planning in spring. My son said he might join them if work allowed. They laughed. Work. That was always his shield, his reason for the distance. I remembered how proud I was when he got his first job, his first promotion. I used to tell people, my boy's doing well. He's making something of himself. Maybe I said it too often. Maybe I forgot to just listen instead of praise. Maybe I made him feel like he owed me something he couldn't repay. Now I owed him silence. Julia's father clapped him on the back, and my son's laugh rang out loud and easy. I realized then that he had chosen his place in the world, and it wasn't beside me anymore. I was the past, a guest whose invitation was more obligation than desire. When the evening began to wind down, coats came out, hugs were exchanged. Julia's family began to leave, all smiles and goodbyes. No one said good night to me directly. They waved vaguely in my direction, like you do toward someone standing near the door, but not quite in the circle. Thanks for coming, Dad, my son finally said, his voice neutral. I looked at him for a long moment, searching for something, regret, affection, anything. There was nothing but politeness. Of course, I said softly. Wouldn't miss it. He nodded, already half turned away. I put on my coat slowly, button by button, hands trembling not from cold, but from the weight of everything unsaid. My grandson ran up one last time, hugging my leg. Bye, Grandpa, he said, smiling wide. That alone broke me a little. I crouched, hugged him back, whispered, Be good, Thomas. When I stood, my son was watching, expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might say something, but he didn't. I stepped outside. The air hit me like truth, cold, sharp, cleansing. Behind me, the door closed with a soft click, muffling the laughter inside. I walked down the snow-covered path to my car. My footprints were the only marks in the untouched white. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the house glowing warm against the night. My breath made clouds in the air. Somewhere inside, my grandson laughed again. And then, finally, I let myself cry. Not loudly, not bitterly, just quietly, the way old men do when there's no one left to hear. The wrapping paper was simple, brown craft paper with a red ribbon, tied the way my late wife used to do it. I'd spent hours carving that little train in my garage, sanding every curve, painting the wheels red, and making sure the wood was smooth enough for a child's hand. When I placed it under the Christmas tree, the lights reflected off its polished surface, and for a brief second, it looked almost magical. Thomas noticed it right away. Is that one for me? He asked, his voice bright, full of that innocent excitement that makes Christmas feel real. I smiled. It is. Go ahead, open it. He tore through the paper eagerly, the sound sharp in the quiet lull after dinner. His small fingers revealed the train piece by piece, and when he saw it fully, his face lit up like the lights above us. Grandpa, did you make this? I did, I said, my voice soft but proud. Just for you. I wanted to tell him how I used to make things like this for his dad when he was little, how he'd spend hours pushing them along the floor, building imaginary worlds. But before I could share that memory, Julia's voice cut through the air. Honey, she said brightly, say thank you and go play with your new tablet from Grandpa Tom. Her tone wasn't cruel, but it was final, like a polite closing of a door. My grandson hesitated. He looked between me and Julia's father, who was sitting comfortably on the couch, swirling a glass of wine, grinning like he owned the room. The big silver box next to him, still half wrapped in glossy paper, glimmered with promise. Thomas glanced at his train again, then at the tablet. I saw the choice play out on his face, the one no child should ever have to make. He looked back at me and whispered, "Thank you," before running off toward the tablet. And just like that, the room moved on. Julia's mother laughed about something on the television. My son was pouring more wine, chatting easily with his father-in-law. The tree lights blinked lazily, casting soft shadows across the floor. I looked down at the small wooden train resting near the couch. Forgotten already. One of the wheels wobbled slightly when the boy dropped it, and I noticed a tiny chip on the paint. I'd meant to fix that before wrapping it. It sat there, half in shadow, like a relic from a different era. I tried to focus on the sounds of the room, to remind myself that I was surrounded by family, that this was supposed to be a good night, but all I heard was distance. It filled the space between me and my son like fog. Julia's father laughed loudly at something, his voice booming, confident. Everyone laughed with him. My son, too. I watched him and thought, is this what he wanted? A new version of family? One that doesn't include the old one? For years, I had imagined moments like this differently. I thought I'd be the kind of grandfather who told stories by the fireplace, who passed down the little things, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to hold a hammer, how to listen to the silence before a storm. But here, in this house, I was a visitor, a shadow with polite manners and an unwanted presence. The wooden train sat lonely under the tree, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. At one point, Thomas came running back into the room, holding his new tablet. "Look, Grandpa," he said, to the other one, not me. "It plays games." Grandpa Tom smiled proudly. "That's right, champ. You can even watch cartoons on it. No need for those old toys anymore, huh?" The words weren't meant to sting, but they did. My son chuckled lightly. "Times have changed, Dad," he said to me, almost apologetically. "Kids these days don't play with wood anymore. Everything's digital." I forced a small smile. "Guess I'm behind the times." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. The conversation drifted elsewhere, to stocks, business trips, and vacation homes. I let it wash over me. My gaze fell again to the toy. I thought of the hours I'd spent alone making it. The way the smell of sawdust filled the garage. The old radio playing in the background. I'd even sanded the edges twice, just so Thomas wouldn't get a splinter. It wasn't just a toy. It was a memory, handcrafted hope. But now it looked small, insignificant, out of place under that glittering, over-decorated tree surrounded by expensive gifts. After a while, Julia noticed me staring. "That's really sweet of you, Mr. Collins," she said with a polite smile. "Handmade things are so charming." "Thank you," I replied. "Of course," she added quickly, already looking away. Charming. The word echoed in my mind. It was the kind of word people used for old things they didn't actually want but didn't know how to throw away. The room grew warmer as the fire crackled. I loosened my collar. My son was showing Julia's father something on his phone. Pictures from work, I think. They laughed like old friends. It was strange, watching your child belong to someone else's family more than your own. After a while, I excused myself. "Just need some air," I said. No one objected. I stepped outside into the night. Snow was falling again, thicker this time. The air was cold, but honest. Each breath felt sharp and real. I leaned against the railing, watching the streetlights blur through the flakes. Behind me, laughter drifted through the window. For a moment, I let myself imagine a different version of this night. A version where my son noticed the train, told Thomas how his grandpa used to make those for him, where the little boy clutched it to his chest and smiled. But that wasn't tonight. When I finally went back inside, the presents had been cleared. The wooden train was gone from under the tree. "Where's the toy?" I asked quietly. Julia looked up. "Oh, I think Thomas left it somewhere. Probably in the living room or his room." "Don't worry, we'll find it." I nodded, pretending not to care. But I noticed the faint scrape of wood under the couch, half hidden, like it didn't belong. Later, when everyone was saying goodnight, I bent down and picked it up. One of the wheels had snapped clean off. I slipped it into my coat pocket without a word. On the drive home, the car was silent except for the sound of snow brushing against the windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. I could feel the broken wool pressing against my chest through the fabric of my coat. It was strange how something so small could weigh so much. When I got home, I set the toy train on the table beside my keys. I stared at it for a long time. The chipped paint, the missing wheel, the little imperfections that no one but me would notice. Then I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Thomas." And for the first time that night, the silence in my house felt kinder than the noise I'd left behind. The moment I stood, the sound of my chair sliding back was almost drowned out by the chatter in the room. Plates clinked, laughter swelled, and the fire popped in the corner. No one noticed. Not at first. I reached for my coat, the old wool one with the worn cuffs, hanging neatly by the door where I'd placed it hours earlier. My fingers brushed the fabric, and I hesitated for a brief second. Part of me still hoping someone would say, "Don't go." No one did. I slipped one arm through the sleeve, then the other. My movements were slow, deliberate. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to leave with what little dignity I had left. The house was warm, filled with light, and the faint scent of cinnamon and roast turkey. It should have felt like Christmas, but all I felt was distance. As I reached for the doorknob, I finally heard my son's voice. Dad. I turned slightly, meeting his eyes. He was standing at the table, a wine glass in his hand, his brow furrowed. Where are you going? Home, I said simply. He frowned, confused, almost irritated. You just got here. I smiled faintly. No, son, I said quietly. I've been gone a long time. You just never noticed. The words came out calm, measured, but each one cut deep as I said them. The room fell silent. Julia looked up from the dessert plates, her expression unreadable. Her father stopped mid-sentence. For the first time that night, everyone looked at me. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. But there was no apology, no realization, just silence. I nodded once, a small, polite gesture, then turned and opened the door. The cold air rushed in like a wave, biting at my skin, carrying with it the scent of pine and snow. I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me. The latch clicked softly, a sound that felt more final than I expected. The world outside was still. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, blanketing the street in silence. The kind of silence that made you hear your own breath. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Each inhale burned with cold, but it felt clean, real. The noise, the laughter, the polite small talk, all of it was gone, replaced by something honest. My boots crunched softly in the snow as I started down the driveway. The Christmas lights from the house glowed behind me, warm and golden. They looked beautiful, but distant, like something that belonged to another life. I walked without hurry. There was no one waiting for me at home, no warm fire, no family. Just the small apartment that still smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel sad. Not anymore. There was a strange peace in that walk, a kind of acceptance that had been years in the making. I thought about my son, about the boy he used to be. I remembered his small hand gripping mine as we crossed the street, the way he used to call me Dad, like it meant something sacred. Somewhere along the way, life had pulled him away, career, marriage, pride, I don't know. Maybe I'd lost him long before tonight. Maybe this was just the moment I finally accepted it. A gust of wind picked up, tugging at my coat. I pulled it tighter around me. The snowflakes melted against my cheeks, tracing slow, cold lines down my skin. Or maybe those weren't snowflakes at all. As I passed the end of the street, I looked back one last time. Through the frosted window, I could see them all sitting there, my son, Julia, her parents, the boy. They were laughing again. Someone must have told a joke. The sound didn't reach me, but I could see the smiles, the gestures. Life had simply moved on, as if I'd never been there. I smiled to myself. It wasn't bitterness this time. It was understanding. Some doors don't close with anger. They close with quiet acceptance. I reached the corner where the streetlight flickered, casting a soft yellow halo on the snow. That's where I stopped and took a deep breath. The night was silent except for the distant hum of the world, faraway cars, the faint chime of wind through decorations. Everything felt bigger than me, and yet, in that moment, I felt strangely free. For the first time in years, there were no expectations. No need to prove I was still relevant, still worthy of a seat at the table. The only person I had to face now was myself, and somehow, that didn't feel as lonely as it used to. A car passed slowly on the main road, its headlights slicing through the snow. The driver didn't look my way, and I didn't care. I kept walking, hands in my pockets. My fingers brushed against something small and rough, the broken wooden train wheel I'd taken from under their couch earlier. I pulled it out, holding it between my fingers. The paint was chipped, and a small crack ran down the middle. But it was still a piece of something I'd made with love, something real. I turned it over in my hand, and despite everything, I smiled. That little toy didn't belong under that perfect, glittering tree. It wasn't made to impress anyone. It was made to remind a boy, my grandson, that someone out there still believed in simple, honest things. I tucked it back into my pocket and kept walking. The snow was falling heavier now, covering the footprints behind me. By morning, they'd be gone completely, as if I'd never walked that road. But that was all right. Not every journey leaves a visible trail. Some are only meant to be felt. When I finally reached the bus stop at the end of the street, I sat down on the cold bench. The streetlight above flickered again, buzzing faintly. I could see my breath in the air. Across the street, through another house's window, a family was gathered around their tree, children laughing, wrapping paper everywhere. For a brief moment, I let myself imagine that it was mine, that I was inside, sitting by the fire, holding a cup of coffee, listening to laughter that didn't sting. But I wasn't, and that was okay. The bus arrived, headlights cutting through the storm. I climbed aboard, nodding to the driver. There were only two other passengers, an old woman with grocery bags and a young man staring at his phone. I sat near the back, by the window. As the bus pulled away, I looked out one last time at my son's house. The lights were still glowing. The snow was falling harder, softening the world into silence. And then it was gone. Just another house among thousands. I leaned back in the seat, closed my eyes, and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't holding on to anger. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I wasn't pretending to be part of something that no longer had space for me. I was just free. When I opened my eyes again, the reflection in the bus window stared back. Older, tired, but lighter somehow. I whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas," and smiled. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes it comes from finally walking away. The apartment was quiet when I returned. Too quiet. The kind of silence that hums in your ears and fills the spaces where laughter used to live. I closed the door behind me gently, and for a long moment, I just stood there, coat still on, listening. The faint ticking of the old wall clock echoed through the room. It was nearly midnight. Christmas Day had officially begun, though it didn't feel like much of a holiday. I hung my coat by the door, shaking off the snow. The floor creaked under my boots as I walked toward the small Christmas tree by the window. It wasn't much, just a few plastic branches, some secondhand ornaments, and a string of dim yellow lights that flickered uncertainly. But I put it up anyway. Old habits, I guess. My wife, God rest her soul, used to love decorating the tree. She'd hum carols softly while wrapping the lights, then step back and say, "It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it feels like home." Now, it was just me, and her empty chair across from mine. I sat down slowly, the ache in my knees reminding me how many winters had passed. The chair opposite me sat untouched, a cushion slightly indented from years of use. I'd left it there on purpose. It felt wrong to move it. Some part of me still believed she was just in another room, folding laundry, humming under her breath. But that night, even that illusion couldn't comfort me. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the soft glow of the tree lights. The shadows danced across the walls, alive for a moment before fading again. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small wooden train, my grandson's gift, the one he'd forgotten, the one I couldn't leave behind. One of the wheels was still broken. I turned it gently in my hands, tracing the cracks in the paint. That toy had taken me weeks to finish. Each piece carved by hand, every detail smoothed with care. It wasn't just a toy, it was a memory, a bridge between generations. But in that house, surrounded by laughter and wine and modern gifts that glowed with screens, it had felt like a relic from a forgotten time. I set it down on the table beside the candle and looked at it under the light. It was small, imperfect, but real. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel humiliated or bitter. I just understood. I realized something as I sat there, staring at that little train, the quiet hum of the heater filling the space around me. Family isn't about bloodlines or traditions. It's not about who shares your last name, or who you raised, or who once called you dad. It's about who still sees you, really sees you, when everyone else has stopped looking. Because being part of a family isn't a right. It's a choice. And somewhere along the way, my son had chosen another world. I can't say I blamed him entirely. Life changes people. It hardens some, blinds others. Maybe I wasn't there enough when he needed me. Maybe I'd made mistakes I couldn't see then. But what I knew for sure was that love, when it's one-sided, turns heavy. You carry it like a stone in your chest, waiting for someone else to notice how much it weighs. And tonight, I'd finally set that stone down. I looked around the small apartment, the faint light from the street casting long shadows across the walls. There were old photographs framed along the shelves. My wedding day, my son's first baseball game, a blurry photo of us fishing at the lake. I used to think those pictures proved something, that they were proof of a bond that couldn't be broken. But now I saw them differently. They weren't proof of anything. They were moments. Beautiful ones, yes, but moments all the same. You can't live forever inside them. I got up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was still, blanketed in snow. The streetlights shimmered against the white, soft and golden. Somewhere, far away, I could hear church bells ringing. Christmas morning. I thought about all the doors I had knocked on in life, some that opened with warmth, some that closed before I could even step through. And I realized I'd been knocking on the same door for years, hoping my son would finally open it and let me back in. But that door wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to someone else now. You can't force your way into a heart that's chosen to shut you out. So I whispered into the quiet room, "It's time. Time to stop waiting for the phone calls that never come. Time to stop hoping for a place at a table that no longer has my name on it. Time to start living for the moments still ahead of me, not the ones long gone." The heater clicked softly, the candle flickered, and the snow kept falling outside, steady, peaceful. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat back down by the tree. The warmth of the mug seeped into my hands. I thought of my grandson again, his small hands clutching that train, his hesitant eyes when he'd looked at me, unsure what to do. There was something in his face, something that reminded me of the boy his father used to be. Maybe, just maybe, not all was lost. Love, after all, has a way of skipping generations, finding its way back when you least expect it. But I wasn't going to chase it anymore. When it came, I'd be ready. And if it didn't, I'd still have peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't lonely. I was simply alone. There's a difference. Loneliness aches for something missing. Being alone means learning to sit with what you have and still finding it enough. I reached out and turned off the light, leaving only the faint glow of the Christmas tree. The room felt softer in the dark. The empty chair didn't look quite so sad anymore. It looked like a space held open for memory, not for grief. I whispered to her, as I often did when the night got too quiet. "You were right, love. It doesn't have to be perfect as long as it feels like home." And for the first time in many years, I think it did. The little wooden train sat on the table, its broken wool catching the light one last time before the bulb flickered out. I smiled at it and leaned back in my chair. Home, I realized, isn't a place. It isn't a house filled with laughter or a table full of guests. It's the peace you find within yourself when you finally stop asking others to make you feel like you belong. That night, I stopped knocking on closed doors. I stopped waiting for my son to look back. And in the quiet hum of my small apartment, surrounded by memories and flickering lights, I finally understood. Sometimes losing something isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of finding yourself again. It had been a few quiet weeks since that Christmas night. The snow outside my small house had long turned to ice. The twinkling lights on the neighbors' homes dimmed and boxed away. The holidays were over. Everyone had gone back to their busy lives. Everyone, it seemed, except me. I had fallen into a rhythm again. Wake up, make tea, feed the birds outside my window, and sit in the same old chair by the fire. It was peaceful, yes, but sometimes peace can feel a lot like loneliness when the house is too quiet. I hadn't heard from my son since that night. No calls, no messages, not even a Happy New Year. But, honestly, I didn't expect one. When I closed that door and stepped out into the snow, I knew something inside me had changed for good. I stopped waiting for him to notice me, to reach out, to care. Then one morning, as I walked out to get the mail, I noticed a small, colorful envelope sitting on top of the pile. The handwriting wasn't adult. It was big, uneven, full of loops and backwards letters. My heart gave a little jump. It read, "To Grandpa, from Liam." I stood there on the porch for a long moment, the cold biting at my fingers. Then I tore it open, carefully, like it was made of gold. Inside was a folded piece of paper covered in crayon drawings, a crooked Christmas tree, a tiny boy with messy brown hair, and an old man with a beard. Above the picture, written in thick, blue crayon, "Grandpa, I missed you. Can we play trains again?" My throat tightened. I had to sit down right there on the steps. The wind was cold, but the warmth that spread through me was something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just love, it was hope. Pure, innocent hope, drawn in crayon by a child who didn't understand the weight of grown-up pride and hurt feelings. I read the note again and again, tracing the words with my thumb. Play trains again. That train set, the little wooden one I had carved by hand, was the last gift I'd given him, the one that got brushed aside for a shiny tablet. I thought he'd forgotten it, tossed it in a toy box somewhere. But maybe he hadn't. Maybe, in that small, quiet heart of his, he'd remembered. Maybe, When everyone else was too busy pretending I wasn't there, he'd noticed. I walked back inside, holding the letter like it was something fragile. I sat down at the table, spread it out in front of me, and just stared. The colors, the clumsy handwriting, the love behind it, it all spoke louder than any apology his father could have ever given me. After a while, I found myself smiling. Not the polite kind I'd worn at the dinner table that night. A real smile, the kind that starts in your chest and reaches your eyes. I pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. My handwriting looked old next to his. Neat, practiced, full of age. But I wrote carefully, choosing every word like it mattered, because it did. Dear Liam, I missed you too, more than you can imagine. Of course we can play trains again. I still have your little engine right here. Maybe next time, you can help me build a whole railway, just you and me. Love, Grandpa. I sealed it up, slipped it into an envelope, and walked to the mailbox before I could change my mind. As I dropped it in, I whispered softly, let the right person read it. The next few days passed slowly, but for the first time in a while, I didn't mind the waiting. Every sound at the door made my heart jump a little. Every small noise outside felt like a promise. And then, one sunny afternoon, there was a knock. I opened the door, and there he was, Liam, bundled in his winter coat, cheeks red from the cold, holding that same little wooden train in his mittened hands. Behind him stood Julia, my daughter-in-law. She didn't say much, just a polite nod, a little hesitant. But she didn't have to. The fact that she was there meant something. Maybe even everything. Liam ran straight to me. Grandpa, I brought the train. You said we could build a railway. I laughed, a full, real laugh, and knelt down. Well then, we'd better get started. He dragged me inside, talking a mile a minute about all the bridges and tunnels he wanted to build. Julia watched quietly from the doorway, her expression softening as she saw us on the floor, surrounded by pieces of wood and laughter. At one point, she said quietly, David's sorry, you know. He just doesn't know how to say it. I looked up at her and nodded. Maybe he doesn't have to. Sometimes it's enough to know. She gave me a small smile and stepped outside to make a call, leaving me and Liam in our little world of trains and joy. As we built, I watched my grandson's face light up, the same way his father's used to when he was little. It hit me then, like a gentle truth. Love doesn't disappear. It just finds new places to land. Maybe my son had lost his way. Maybe pride, pressure, and life had built walls between us. But here, sitting on the floor, surrounded by toy trains and the sound of a child's laughter, I realized something powerful. Love had found its way back to me, through the very next generation. When Liam left that evening, he hugged me tight and whispered, See you soon, Grandpa. I stood at the door long after they drove away, the wooden train still on the table, the letter still pinned to the wall. The snow began to fall again, quietly, gently, covering the ground in white, a clean slate. And I thought to myself, maybe that's what love really is. Not perfect, not always returned the way we hope, but something that keeps coming back, no matter how cold the winter gets. That night, as I turned off the lights and sat by the window, I whispered a quiet thank you. To the universe, to my grandson, maybe even to my son. Because sometimes love doesn't end. It just takes the long way home.